Welcome to Fail2ban Mastery. If your server has a public IP, trust me, the bots are already knocking. Over the next 13 lessons, we'll go from a fresh apt install all the way to a hardened, production-ready setup. We'll move through 4 phases: foundations and the log model, then jails, then custom filters and actions, and finally, real-world tuning and alerts. Patient pace, real configs, no magic. Let's begin. Quick check on who this course is built for: real beginners. Not folks who've already deployed Fail2ban and want the deep cuts. I mean people whose comfort zone is basic Linux. If you can move around the command line, know what an IP and a port are, can tail a log and SSH into a box, you're ready. Everything else, the rejects, the IP tables internals, the IDS comparisons, the containers, we set aside. Plain VM, patient steps, that's the deal. So here's the road ahead. 12 more lessons grouped into 4 stages. We start with foundations, what Fail2ban actually is, getting it installed, and watching your first ban happen. Then jails, the anatomy of jail.local, the timing knobs like ban time and find time and running multiple jails side by side. Stage 3 is where it gets expressive. Filter rejects, custom filters, custom actions. And stage 4 ships it. Whitelists, alerts to email or webhooks, and final hardening. Each lesson builds on the last, so by L12, you've got a real production-shaped defense, not a toy. Now, before we touch a config file, let's be honest about why this tool exists. You'll hear people say, just close the ports, and it's half true. Firewalls block ports, sure, but the ports you actually need open: SSH on 22, Web on 80 and 443, Mail on 25 and 587. Those are exactly the ones attackers hammer. A typical internet-facing VM sees around 10,000 SSH login attempts a day. Roughly 95% of WordPress sites get probed on WP login and XMLRPC. And Fail2ban itself? 30 megabytes of RAM. Ships with every distro. There's basically no public Linux server that wouldn't benefit. The question is how you configure it, not whether you run it. So what is Fail2ban actually doing under the hood? It tails your log files, matches suspicious patterns, and tells the firewall to drop that IP. No packet inspection, no malware scanning, it just reads logs. And that simplicity is the whole point. In practice, you'll see 4 roles: shielding SSH after a handful of failed logins, defending web app logins like WP login, blocking the scanners poking at .env or phpMyAdmin, and protecting mail, FTP, and VPN, anything that writes an auth failure to a log. Now, before we install anything, let's talk about your lab. You don't need a fancy setup. One Linux VM is genuinely all you need for the entire course. Ubuntu 22.04 or Debian 11 and up, sudo access, modern systemed, about a gigabyte of RAM, and an internet connection for apt. That's it. Localhost gets you through the first 10 lessons, and by lesson 11, when we wire up real alerts, a €4 cloud VM from Hetzner or DigitalOcean is plenty. Optionally, spin up a second VM as your pretend attacker. It's the safest way to actually watch your jails fire. With your lab ready, let's talk about how to actually use this series. The rule is simple: watch, type, repeat. Don't copy-paste those commands. Type them character by character, because your fingers learn what your eyes skim past. After each lesson, deliberately break things. SSH in with the wrong password 5 times and ban yourself. That self-ban teaches more than any slide can. And pace yourself. 1 lesson a day, sit with it, then move on. Fail-ban concepts compound, so steady beats fast every time. Before we touch a single config file, let's lock down the vocabulary. Fail2ban only really has 7 words you need to know. A jail is a named rule set. Jail.local is the file you actually edit, never jail.conf, and a filter is the rejects that decides what bad looks like in a log. Then comes the action. What happens on a match? Ban time, how long the IP sits in the corner. Find time, your rolling window. and max retry, the number of strikes inside that window. Learn these now, and every lesson after this one clicks 3 times faster. And here's the destination. This is a real jail.local, the kind you'll write yourself by lesson 12. Right now, most of it probably looks like alphabet soup, and that's completely fine. But notice, a global default block, an SSH jail with email and whois on every ban, and a custom WordPress filter that bans on the very first XMLRPC hit. By the end of this series, you won't just read this file, you'll tune it for your own server. Now, before we go further, let's be honest about what this series is not. This is a beginner course, so we're staying focused on Fail2ban fundamentals, which means CrowdSec, full web application firewalls like MADIA security, distributed cluster setups across dozens of servers, and a deep dive into Aiptable's internals are all off the table. They're worth learning, just not first. Each one points to a future series. For now, we master the classic, then we earn the right to scale up. So here's what I'm committing to. Across all 13 lessons, every config will be real, copy it, paste it, it runs. Every regex gets broken down character by character. No magic, only mechanism, so by the end you can debug, not just copy. The final lesson ships a config you can actually deploy. Real ban times, whitelists, alerts, and no padding. About 12 minutes per lesson, 1 a day, 2 weeks, and you're done. And that wraps lesson 0. You've got the map, the lab requirements, the vocabulary, and an honest sense of the scope ahead. Next up, lesson 1, what Fail2ban actually is. A Python daemon that tails log files, how it differs from a firewall, a WAF, and CrowdSec, and the mental model you'll carry through the rest of the course. Logline in, banned IP out. See you there.